Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Jeremiah Pricer.
Good evening, everybody. Excited to be on. Always excited to be on. Let's talk some boxing, Mike.
Yeah, because I think this is the only time we're going to start a show off previewing fights and actually preview a pay-per-view boxing event in Wilmington, Delaware, Jeremiah.
Hey, I'm excited to do so. I don't care where they're staging the fight so long as it's worthwhile.
Well, I don't think it is, though.
But No, it's not. But
yeah. So we're going to start off with Roy Jones Jr., who's now lost 9 times. His last win was against Rodney Moore, I think, in August of last year. His fight before that, he beat a guy by the name of Byron Phillips, who was making his professional debut, which usually, guys like Roy Jones doesn't fight anymore. The fight before that, he lost to Enzo Maccarinelli, who actually was a decent fighter at one point also. But Roy Jones is fighting Bobby Gunn, who is the bare-knuckle boxing champion. He's 21-6 with 18 KOs. His last boxing match was in 2013 when he lost to an ancient Glenn Johnson. The year before that, he lost to another ancient guy in James Toney. Do you think Bobby Gunn has what it takes to beat Roy Jones Jr.?
yeah, he sure as hell might. I mean, it's Bobby Gunn is he's well known in the underground circles. Again, he's the bare knuckle champion of the world, and I've seen some of his fights. At this point in time, he very well may have the skills to be Roy Jones Jr. I mean, Jones didn't look half bad, in the early going against an also faded Maccarinelli. But I don't know. I feel like it's a toss-up at this point. Gunn has never been near the top of any level in professional boxing, or either near the top of the top level in professional boxing, and Roy is much removed from it. So I see it as a toss-up fight. It's more of a gimmick than anything. And at this point, Roy Jones needs to do whatever he can to make a little money, and no surprise, Bobby Gunn would oblige.
Do you think HBO doesn't pay Roy Jones Jr.?
I think they do. Or
do you think maybe they just don't pay him that much because he's not very good at being a commentator either?
No, I think he probably gets a nice salary from HBO. I just think boxing is one of the few things that he's known all of his life, and I think it's one of the few things that he has a hard time giving up. I mean, you can tell that the guy has a passion for it. I mean, again, he's been doing it all his life. I just don't. I think it's hard for him to give up. That's what I think it is.
Also, he could become a world champion again because this is for the vacant World Boxing Foundation Cruiserweight Championship.
Yeah, that's not a championship anybody puts, except for maybe Bobby Gunn and Roy Jones Jr. That's not a belt that anybody really puts much weight into. I certainly don't. Whoever wins really doesn't matter much to me. But I don't know. Good luck.
All right, now we'll go to the real boxing, which will happen Saturday night at the Centos Center in Cincinnati, Ohio. There's 3 interesting fights, I think. The first one will be up-and-coming Marcus Brown, who's 18-0 with 13 knockouts, taking on Thomas Williams, who's 20-2 with 14 knockouts. His last fight, he got knocked out by Adonis Stevenson. He does have a win over Edwin Rodriguez. Not that that's anything to brag about, but I like Brown in this fight. What do you think?
I think it's close. I think this is a good pairing. I think the matchmakers did a rock-solid job here because they're, in terms of talent, they're both close. I mean, Williams, he's not an elite fighter, certainly. I mean, Adonis Stevenson showed that. But
really, Brown hadn't fought enough guys that are good to really know where he stands.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, if you've seen Brown's last fight, most people thought he lost. He fought a guy from, trying to think, I can't remember his name. It was hard to pronounce then, Radislavic or something like that. But most people thought that Brown lost that fight. He was hurt. I believe he was dropped in that bout. Williams, we know what his cap is because, not only did Stevenson beat him, but he was also upset by.
I remember that. I think that fight was on Showtime, wasn't it?
It was. But I mean,
okay, I remember watching that fight. I remember thinking he got his ass whipped.
Yeah, I mean, most people thought that he lost. So I think, looking at the the level of competition that they have had, their skill set, I think it's a 50-50 fight and a good one. But we're certainly going to know a lot about Brown after this one.
Yeah, and really, I mean, most everybody gets knocked out by Adonis Stevenson, so you can't really hold that against him. Next up, we have another interesting matchup where we've got another guy I don't think we know a lot about, and David Evanesian did beat Shane Mosley. Shane Mosley's getting up there in age, and that was a really close fight that was controversial. He'll be fighting the former light welterweight champion of the world, Lamont Peterson, 34-3, 17 knockouts. His last fight was a majority decision over Felix Diaz. What do you think is going to happen here?
Well, I'm going to probably go with the line of the betting odds here and, assume that Lamont Peterson gets a victory over Evanesian. I probably think that it's going to be a decision win in Peterson's favor. But I wouldn't be surprised if Peterson stopped him. Evanesian, again, he's a solid fighter. Again, like you noted, he defeated an elder Shane Mosley, but it was a really close fight. And if you're struggling that much with an old Mosley, who doesn't look half bad for his age, but if you're struggling with a Mosley at that age, I just don't think you have enough to beat a guy like Lamont Peterson, a well-rounded fighter who can punch a bit, box a bit. I just think Peterson's on another level here. And granted, he does win. I think it bodes well for his future prospects because not only will he be a top welterweight, but I'm sure he's wanting Danny Garcia to come out victorious against Keith Thurman, and then he can have his rematch in a fight. The first fight most people thought Peterson prevailed.
Yeah. My take on this, I don't think Evanesian's even in his class. I think Peterson should dominate this fight, but Peterson is a little bit older now, and if people want to hear, we had Lamont and Barry Hunter, his trainer-manager, on last week. You can go to grillingtruth.net and find that interview. That brings us to the main event, the Battle of the Adrians. We've got Adrien Broner, 32-2, against Adrien, Granados?
Yep.
18-4-2. Granados' biggest win was over up-and-coming Amir Iman. Broner's last fight was against Ashley Theroplane, who he knocked out in, I forget what round, but I forgot, I think, just because his last name's Theroplane. But what's your take on this? I think this is going to be a better fight than what people think, and I think the weight change has something to do with why I believe that.
Yeah, and I've heard guys like Michael Montero say the same thing. Again, for my part, it's hard for me to say. I'm not exactly sure what to think because Granados, I've seen him fight. Does he look like a big 140-pounder? No, and neither does Broner. So it's hard for me to say that the size is going to play a big role in the fight. But in my opinion, Broner is the better fighter. I think most of us recognize this. Granados, he had a nice upset win against Amir Imam, who, if you look at the styles, Broner fights a bit like Imam, but he's a bit taller. Of course, he's not as skilled. But I just think Broner's a bit too quick in this. I think he's just a bit too sharp. Granados, I don't think hits hard enough to bother Broner. If there's one thing we should give him credit for, it's that he's shown a pretty solid chin. I mean, it's not like he's getting rocked by, Paulie Malignaggi types. Porter hurt him, Maidana hurt him, but those.
Does anybody get rocked by Paulie Malignaggi?
I've seen a few guys. I remember he dropped the iron-chinned, the African guy, not Nagujo, but I'm struggling to find his name. The guy that fought Miguel Cotto, hard guy. I mean, he didn't really hurt him, but the thing I'm saying is that Broner, he's only getting hurt by big punchers, and I think that bodes well for him in this fight because Granados isn't really a hard puncher. He's a volume puncher, and that may trouble Broner, and that may upset him because we've seen in the past guys who continuously throw offset Broner because he likes to pick his shots. So, we may see an upset here, but again, I wouldn't favor it. I think Broner deserves to be the betting odds guy, and I'm going to favor him by decision here.
Well, I think this. I think there's a couple reasons why the weight's a big difference. I think, number one, Broner has a tendency to blow up in between fights. So it tells me maybe he's not training, taking this as seriously as he should. And number two, both of his losses were the two times when he fought above 140 pounds.
Yeah, and I don't think he's an elite fighter above. Honestly, I don't think he's an elite fighter above 135. I think his best weight was 130, 135. Since he's moved up, he just doesn't have the same ability. I mean, when he was bigger and stronger, and his power's a bit more effective, his speed was a bit more effective. He could, blow guys out and look good doing so. I mean, he was arguably the best 130-pounder in the world, arguably the best 135-pounder in the world when he was there. But at 140, he's not the best. I mean, that's clear. Does he beat a guy like Crawford? I don't think anybody thinks that. Does he even beat a guy like Victor Postol? Would he beat a guy like Lucas Matisse? I don't think so. So Broner, for his part, I'm hoping he gets his stuff together because he's not going to continue fighting. He's going to be relegated to fighting for big paychecks here pretty soon if he doesn't get it together with his money.
Yeah, if he keeps it up, he's going to fight for the World Boxing Foundation welterweight championship. And nobody wants that.
Yeah, is there a welterweight bare knuckle boxing champion? I don't know who that is, but
I don't know. I thought maybe maybe Bruce Finch or somebody can make a comeback.
Yeah, he might want to get Broner's number if Broner loses to Granados.
See, you're not big into the 80s, so you don't even remember Bruce Finch, do you?
I've heard of Bruce Finch, but no, I'm not familiar with him.
Well, I believe on this day, 30-some years ago, he got knocked out in the third round by Sugar Ray Leonard.
Ah.
All right, I'm going to go on a limb. I think Granados beats him. I think Granados wins a close decision, which would be hard to do in Broner's hometown, but I just like Granados. Seen some interviews with him. Seems like a well-spoken kid. I know his best friend was recently killed, I think in November or December in a shooting accident. That's not why I'm picking him, though. Broner's weight in between fights, and this is the thing, most guys, when they balloon up in between fights, like a Ricky Hatton, their career ends a lot sooner than what it should because that takes a toll on your body making weight all the time.
Right, and I don't know, have you seen his dad? I mean, his dad's a big guy.
Yes, his dad is fairly large.
Yeah, it looks like, Broner, if he doesn't have that Spartan mentality, when he's walking down an aisle with nachos and cheese, he's gonna put on the weight and he's gonna struggle to get it off. And
let's face it, if you look at a guy, I'm not comparing him by any sense to Broner-Adrian, but the same kind of thing, a guy that would, if he blew up between fights, he wasn't very good when he fought. It's when he was active and fighting every few months that he was unbeatable. But when you gave him a little bit of time off, the weight would balloon up. He would train, and then really, if you're Broner and you weigh 160 pounds, like 4 or 5 weeks ago, you're not really concentrating on your boxing or perfecting your boxing technique. You're just trying to make weight.
Right, yeah, no, I think that's a great point to bring up. That's why, to his credit, Ricky Hatton would put on, he'd go an extra 4 weeks beforehand because he recognized that was the case. But, of course, just ballooning itself is going to hurt you in the long run.
But his ballooning he would be 140 and he would be weighing 200 pounds almost, which is what Adrien used to do. I don't think Broner gets that big, but from what I'm told, since I do live in the area and know a few people at the gym that he trains at, it usually starts off around 165. Yeah,
that's pretty rough stuff. But
and 25 pounds is a lot of weight to lose in 6 weeks, unless you are like Broner's dad. He could lose 25 pounds in a week without a problem.
Yeah, probably without any doubt at all, but that's why
I guess we're not going to have Broner's dad on the show anytime soon. But go ahead.
No, but that's why you see guys like Bernard Hopkins, Mayweather, guys like that, guys who are constantly in the gym, live in the gym. They typically have better longevity. So Broner, I've seen some of his interviews recently. He's saying that he's trying to shore up his issues, dedicate himself to boxing. We'll see.
But he's been saying that for the last 3 years.
Well, and that's what you would tell the public, right? Would you, if you wanted people to support you, would you tell them, oh, well, I'm 20 pounds over 2 weeks before the fight, and I'm going to rely on losing 10 pounds of that, for water weights? You're not going to tell people that, you're struggling to make weight, that you're struggling.
Yeah, and you're always going to tell them the next time will be different. Chris Arreola, perfect example. Yeah. Next time I'm going to come in shape, maybe 5 pounds more than before. Or a guy like Tony Tubbs. I remember Tony Tubbs, I think, was offered like $100,000 or $500,000 when he fought Mike Tyson to come in at less than 238 pounds, and he showed up at like 252 or something, or 245. He didn't even make the weight for the money.
Jeez. Yeah.
But Tony Tubbs was another great Cincinnati fighter that just didn't take it seriously.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand boxing is a hard sport to do. I mean, it's one of those sports, because it's not, you know, whereas football is mostly seasonal. Baseball, you know, they have a long record. You know, basketball, boxing. If you don't do this continuously in a game as dangerous as this, again, I mean, I can go on all night.
Well, I think football's the same thing. I mean, you'll have guys that come in training camp out of shape. I mean, since we're in the Cincinnati vicinity, Vontaze Burfict, Ray Malayuga, those guys always come in out of shape. They're usually out of shape halfway through the season, too. Because if you'll get out of shape and you're supposed to be a professional athlete, and that's supposed to be your profession, and you don't stay in shape, or at least close to it all the time, then you really aren't that great of a fighter. You're not that great of a football player because you don't take it seriously as other people do. And the problem is when you go in against somebody that takes it seriously all the time, even if you have a little bit more talent, he's going to beat you in most cases because he's taking it more seriously. It means more to him. And it makes you wonder if somebody in between fights balloons 30 pounds, if it really means that much to him.
Right, and the unfortunate thing for these people who take advantage of it and balloon, they don't realize that they're hurting their own wallet. I mean, guys like Broner are making damn good money with, you know, 1 or 2 fights a year. But if
Broner never loses to anybody, he probably gets a Mayweather fight at some point and makes $30 million.
Yeah, he probably would. I mean, you know, if he wouldn't have ballooned, if he wouldn't have had to fight at 147, I understand, you know, he's thinking from a legacy perspective. But yeah, he keeps it together. He's going to have more paydays, and so therefore his wallet is going to be fatter.
Well, he probably would have had a big fight against Terrence Crawford already at 135.
You never know. I mean, he would have had all sorts of dough, I mean, by now, but it's, you know, again, it's hurting him. Whether or not he recognizes it, it's not really my concern at this point.
All right, we got any boxing news to talk about, or are we done for tonight?
There's always boxing news. I mean, there's always something going on. I mean, I don't know if you heard, but apparently Povetkin and Wilder went to court, and they only deliberated 30 minutes.
Wilder won, from what I heard.
Yeah, they only deliberated for like half an hour, and then they awarded Wilder, I think it was $5 million. Basically, they said that meldonium, the stuff that Povetkin had trace amounts of in his system, was good enough to, you know, imply that he had, you know, ill intent there. And so, yeah, he got off pretty well, and I guess he can now focus on his Gerald Washington fight.
Yeah, where he'll make about $5 million again for little to no work, probably.
Probably. I mean, and I'm not going to give Wilder too hard of a time for this. I mean, I don't know if Washington's any worse than the guy who was originally, you know, slated.
I think Washington's better than the guy who was originally going to fight.
Yeah, he very well could be. I mean, I don't know. With Washington, I'm still very much up in the air with what I think his talent level is, because I thought he was losing to Amir Mansour. I don't think
Mansour is not a bad fighter. I would rather see Mansour fight Deontay Wilder.
Yeah, I think that'd be an interesting fight. But
I mean, Mansour is a tough guy.
Yeah, he is, and he's got big left-hand power. But at this point, I think he's 43, 44 years of age. He doesn't have much left, and I don't think he's ever going to get a title shot.
Maybe he can fight Roy Jones for a World Boxing Foundation heavyweight title next year sometime.
Roy, there's your first defense.
Well, now he can move up and win a heavyweight title again. It'll be as legitimate as when he claimed he was the heavyweight champion from beating John Ruiz.
Yeah, he can defend against Mansour for the WBF title.
Now, you got to say the World Boxing Foundation, because there was a WBF, the World Boxing Federation, if you remember, in the 90s. I don't know if it's still around or not. Probably is, but...
Yeah, I'm not exactly...
But I remember it was one of the few, so-called title fights in the state of Indiana's history. I think Kenny King fought Terry Ray for the WBF cruiserweight title in Evansville, Indiana. Or no, wait, it was in Terre Haute. It was in Terre Haute. Actually, it was a great fight. You got to YouTube it. Really good.
Yeah, no, I'll cue that up whenever I...
So it's a shout-out to Terry Ray and Kenny Keene. And they were both tough guys. But it really, they fought twice. I think I think both times they fought on CBS, too. Would have been in the probably mid to late 90s. I think the first fight was so good they actually replayed it on CBS, and then the second fight they showed live.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, I don't think we've talked much about the fights from last week, and I think we should probably go over them briefly. With a couple of guests. I mean, Robert Easter versus Luis Cruz. Did you happen to catch that one?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Easter's legit. I think Easter and Garcia could be interesting. I think Mikey Garcia will tear him up, but I think Robert Easter's very talented and could be better than what we think, even.
Oh yeah, I think if he can. I mean, he's a young guy, and he messed up a bit against Cruz. Is a wily veteran. He looked good against Ivan Redkach, and he was winning that fight, in my opinion, until he got caught. Cruz looked pretty solid there, a lot of hearts. Got to give him credit, but I agree. Easter looked rock solid. There are a few things I think he can do to shore up just some of the flaws that I see, but he's a tall guy. I love that he used the jab first in a lot of instances. He was accurate with his shots, had good power, went to the body well. That was exciting on my part. Not only that, but I like the fact that he had a little grit, so whenever it came down to it, and he had Cruz hurt, he had a killer instinct. He went for it. And it was exciting, and I think at this point, I think Mikey Garcia is just a bit too much for him. I like Easter's size, but when I was looking at the jab,
it'd be interesting, but I think Garcia would take him.
Yeah, I think so, too. I mean, not only does Garcia have more experience, but I like his jab. Easter's jab is one of his strengths, but he had a tendency to kind of hang it out there every once in a while, and I didn't like that. You do that against a guy like Garcia, who's technically, a master class when it comes to...
Yeah, he's going to pick you apart.
Yeah, when it comes to technical proficiency, I think, that's going to happen. On the undercard was one of our guests, Rasheed Warren.
Yeah, Rasheed Warren, which you can check that interview out on thegrillingtruth.net, too. And Warren dropped him twice in the first round. I don't think he really had him hurt that bad, double Z. But what was your take on that one? You think the decision was fair?
I think it was completely fair. I mean, Warren did, like you said, he did good work early. He dropped him twice. Double Z came back really nicely. I was very impressed with his fight strategy. I mean, he came right at Warren, and he just threw a ton of punches, had good power. He wasn't as technically solid as I remember him being from his old stuff against, like, Kareem Gouffry, but he was solid. I liked him. I liked his work, and kudos to him. I mean, he's Ricky Hatton's first world title winner. He went out and got it. I mean, Double Z, after the first round, he came on, he got in Warren's grill, kept throwing punches, and then Warren seemed to kind of fight back a bit in the middle rounds, but Double Z, I think, did the best work overall and ended up taking home the victory.
Yeah, and I don't think Warren's done by any means. It wasn't like it was a complete one-sided beating. So does that make Double Z your best bantamweight in the world? Because you said last week that you thought Warren was.
No, Yamanaka is – well, I also said last week that Yamanaka is the champion, and until he's defeated, he's the best in the world. Yamanaka is the, lineal champion. So until somebody takes that away, again, he's the best.
Well, until they won the World Boxing Foundation title, he didn't really mean much to me. But all right, I guess we will wrap it up for this week. We'll be back next week to review the fights at the Cintas Center in Cincinnati, Ohio. We will actually have myself and my photographer, James Ernst, will be at the event. Jeremiah lives in the middle of nowhere out in Colorado, so. Yeah,
that's. I would like to fly out to Cincinnati, but unfortunately, got all these people at work requested this weekend off. I'm a sucker. I got a day job. I'm a sucker. Got day jobs.
Yeah, but all right. So, any final words, Jeremiah?
No, any final words? I'm excited. I mean, I think things are really going to start picking up here soon. We've had a really good 2017 so far. James DeGale, Badu Jack, Garcia's Latichin in. We've seen a ton of good fights, and they're a lot more planned out. And I think 2017 is going to be a good year. And boxing almost seems to work in these sort of cycles where, 1 year.
Yeah, because it seems like you'll have years where you'll be in August wondering what the hell the fight of the year could be.
Yeah. And, and speaking of fight of the year, I mean, we've had Burkelt versus...
well, you had 2 on one card.
Yeah. I mean, Burkelt Vargas and Roman versus Mira. I mean, 2017's going good so far. So I'm looking forward to the rest of the year and seeing what they have to offer. And I'm hoping to get more press credentials to some of these fights.
All right, guys, so you can check out all of the writings from our boxing writers and all of our podcasts on thegruelingtruth.net. Make sure you check that out. You can listen to all the shows on iHeart, iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, Google Music. Anywhere you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Jeremiah Pricer, I am Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.